So just bring your body into a comfortable position to go into meditation. And just begin to bring your focus inward and upward, closing your eyes. We're going to focus on the soul within you. And really, it's not just the soul that is within you, it is that which you are. You are the soul. You are not this body. And so we're going to move into an action of forgiveness, of forgiving the self, forgiving this body, for always calling us out into the world, ever redirecting our attention. And in this forgiveness, we are going to love this body and all the elements of this body that does keep drawing us back out. And through the loving, the body consciousness begins to understand, to allow us to do the inner work, to allow us to wake up inside and discover these things that are in us. Within the soul, there is nothing to forgive. The soul is perfect and complete and whole as it is. But it's those parts of ourself that we call ourself, the mind, the emotions, the imagination in the body, and even in the unconscious, that we call ourselves to be, that we identify ourselves as, that do distract us, that do call us out into the world. So let us go inside and just begin forgiving. Forgiving ourselves. Forgiving ourselves for our distractions. Forgiving ourselves for being distracted. Forgiving ourselves for ever focusing outside of ourselves. And here's one that you really want to work on. We look outside of ourselves constantly, looking around, looking for things to do, looking for distractions, the radio, the TV, the computer, looking at our environment around us, ever looking at things we need to do, we want to do, and getting absorbed in all of that. And yet there's this call within us that is ever saying, what about in here? Why not come inside? Why not spend some time with yourself inside? But there's often a fear of having to look at ourselves for who we really are, or who we think we are. And we're afraid to look at all those things about ourselves that we judge and we hate, and we feel a disturbance with. And so it's easier just to look outside and be distracted by the world and caught up in the mind, the emotion, and the imagination than it is to sit down and confront some of this energy and be able to freely move inside past it. So at this time, just focus yourself once again at the seat of the soul and be aware of the loving that resides there right now. For the soul is the living, loving essence of God. That is you. And that loving is looking, ever looking for an opportunity to share itself with the physical form, to share itself with the unconscious, with the mind, with the emotions, with the imagination, and with the body. So just now see yourself in your soul, in that loving that is there, and begin to share your loving with all those components of the physical self. And as you're doing that, forgive any and all things that seem to stand in your way of sharing that loving, that seem to be blocking that loving. The fear, the judgments, the beliefs, the unworthiness, the anxiousness, and everything. Just forgive it as you come across it. Just love it and forgive it, and move on to the next. So as you move into the unconscious, there's not a lot that you can be aware of to forgive. But move into the unconscious of yourself right now anyway. And forgive yourself for any barriers, blocks, creations that you might have created here in an unconscious way, or that you have taken from the conscious and moved into the unconscious to not have to look at it, to be forgetful of it. Just forgive all of that, love all of that, and then move on. And move on through the unconscious. And continue doing the forgiveness if there still feels like there's something causing hesitation or disturbance. Forgive it and move on towards that which is next below the unconscious, which is the mind. And as you move into the mind, you may find that there's a lot here to forgive. All the beliefs that you have of yourself, that you've put on yourself, or that you've taken on from others and made them your part of yourself. All of your judgments of yourself. All of the judgments you've taken on from others and accepted them as your own. Just begin forgiving any and all energy that you feel, any and all thoughts that you come across that no longer serve you, that you know is not really you, because they do not line up with that essence of your loving. It's as simple as saying, I forgive myself for believing that I am unworthy. I forgive myself for believing I am unlovable. I forgive myself for believing that I can't do these things in my life. I forgive myself for believing that I am stupid. And be aware that you may not feel anything really happening. You may not feel any change or movement at this time. But the more and more you do this every day, the more you're going to see things dissolve, things releasing, things moving away. And you're going to see more and more that loving inside of you moving in the action of forgiveness. Because the loving is ever looking for a place to express itself. And forgiveness is one of the greatest expressions of loving that there is. So as you forgive yourself, that loving is automatically going to begin to flow into every part that you are forgiving, and even into other parts that you haven't yet done so. So I know there's a few hours of forgiveness in the mind, but let's move on down into the emotions. Between the mind and emotions, there's a lot of movement, a lot of interactions. And as we move into the emotions, you may actually feel the energy stirring. You may feel the energies trying to stop you from doing this, from blocking you or distracting you, and saying, we don't have the time, let's do something else. Let's go do something fun. This isn't fun. But now we're going to forgive the energies of emotion that are ever stirring us into actions and reactions. So go inside and find an emotion, just one. A fear, an anger, a judgment, an unworthiness. Whatever it is, just find that one. And from that loving place inside of you, at the seat of the soul, just say, I love you, and I forgive you. And in forgiving, I release you and transform you into the loving that you really are. You have just been misnamed, misdirected, and misexpressed. And so I release you so that I can now express the loving that has been stored away here. And do that with the next, and the next, and the next. You don't have to dwell on anything for a long time. Forgiveness is instantaneous, and the movement of loving is quick. So you can do a number of things, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then when you come back tomorrow and do it again, it just adds to the loving in those areas of your consciousness and allows greater healing and expansion of the loving within you. And it allows the release of all those barriers, of all those beliefs and feelings that have stopped you. So remember that this is quick. It's not long. You don't have to dwell on something and wait for something to happen. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's done. You can do many things in just a very short time. Because at these levels, things move quickly. Things transform and release instantly. So all those things that you have ever eating at you, mentally or emotionally, can now begin to be moved and transformed and released. And all that remains is loving. Because that loving will be transformed. Remember, all that you are is loving. So everything inside of you is loving, seeking to be expressed, longing to be expressed. And we've misexpressed some of that energy of loving by misdefinitions, misbeliefs. And so we store these things up, trying not to feel, trying not to think, rather than having loving to express. We have it all locked up in a misdefinition of self. And now we're going to let that go. We're going to redefine ourselves totally as a loving being and allow that loving to truly express itself in all ways. Now let's move on into the imagination, the level below the causal realm, the realms of emotion. And here is a lot of energy. Oh my goodness. Look at all that energy that is just moving around. Just moving, moving, moving. And if you pay attention, you're going to see a lot of that energy that comes into your meditations trying to distract you, trying to take you into daydreams, trying to call you away from your focus on the sacred name. Oh my goodness, I want to forgive all that. I'm going to go in and forgive all these distractions. It's even hard to name some of them because they're moving so quickly and they don't have a real definition on them. And a lot of it is just like a daydream energy that carries me off in another direction. And I'm just going to forgive it. I'm going to forgive that energy and just let it go. And let whatever loving that is stored in this just come forward and manifest its loving in my unconsciousness, in my mind, in my emotions, and in my imagination. And I know that through this action of forgiving myself on all these levels, I am truly becoming a loving being in this creation. And I am waking up to the loving being that I am in soul. And now let's direct that energy of loving and forgiveness into the physical body. And here there are a lot of fears and judgments, hurts, and anger stored up in so many different ways. But what we're going to do is just forgive it all, one by one or all together. Just forgive it all. And forgive the body for holding on to all of this for so, so long. And we're going to forgive ourselves for all the judgments we've placed on our body. And just begin to move that loving throughout the body consciousness. And loving it all. Loving it, appreciating it, honoring it, glorifying in it. Just let that loving begin to fill all these areas where all this judgment, all this anger, all this fear, everything and all things that we have stored up in our body consciousness, just let the loving now sweep it all away as we forgive it all. We forgive ourselves for creating all this for ourselves, believing all of this for ourselves, and allowing ourselves to get caught up and live it all the time. We just now forgive ourselves for all of it, whether it be on the physical, the imaginational, the emotional, the mental, or the imaginational. Now let the loving just sweep through it all, moving it all, transforming it all, into that pure loving that is you the divine soul. And you might feel that loving moving. You might see sparkling lights as that loving moves through you. You may hear sounds as it moves through you. Just be aware, every day, going forth again to forgive whatever you've just created in this day, in this moment, and moving that out so that you can live the loving as fully as you can and be the loving that you truly are. It's all just that simple and all just that quick. Now, share the loving that has been brought forward. Share that loving with God. Share that loving with God in all ways that you can. Through your thoughts, through your emotion, through your imagination, and through your body. However that might be. And then open and allow God's loving to begin to move through your soul and into the body consciousnesses so that you are filled overflowing with God's loving, your loving, that divine loving that is you. And like a chalice is filled overflowing, so be that chalice, filled overflowing. See the loving flowing into you, filling you up, and see the loving overflowing, going out into the world, going out through your body consciousness, going out to fill the world with its loving. And see that loving continue to overflow and also go to God once again, so that you are ever giving and receiving with God, and ever giving and receiving with God's creation. This is who you are. You are the divine movement of loving. This is who you are. This is what you're longing to be. You already are this, but you just have to allow it. And so as we begin to move back into the body and the world consciousness, just bring all that loving forward with you and realize that it is through forgiveness that we discover this loving. And as you open your eyes, just bring that loving with you. So that you begin to be that living expression of loving whatever you are doing, wherever you go. Eyes open, eyes closed.